Right, okay, I think we are live. At least I hope we are live. It's been a very long time since I last used OBS, so I'm hoping everything is as it should be. But hopefully, we'll get some people coming in soon. So first of all, I'd just like to welcome all of you to our lesson today. So today we're going to be doing a couple of things. We're going to be looking at the passive voice and the causative voice. Okay, thank you, Andrew, for confirming that you are here. That's wonderful to know that everything is working as it should be. So today we're going to be looking at the passive voice and the causative voice. I hope that we're going to be able to learn something new. For those of you who have studied this topic before, hopefully this will be a good opportunity for you to revise, to remind yourselves of different points. Also, very importantly, during the stream, there will always be a QR code on the screen, which is up there at the moment. During the stream, we're raising money for Prisutny, which is a wonderful project to help the rehabilitation of Ukrainian soldiers. So if you are able to donate, I would be extremely grateful for you for that. Obviously, if you can't, then that's completely understandable. I understand it's a very difficult time. So we're going to be looking at the passive and causative, and these two areas of language are often quite challenging for Ukrainian speakers, especially because of the fact that very often in Ukrainian you don't use the passive so much, and the causative almost doesn't really exist, or not in the same way as it does in the English language. Hopefully I can explain some ideas, some of the concepts. There will be some tasks for you to do as well, to do some practice. I hope that it will be useful for you. Also important to highlight here that I do speak Ukrainian as well. So if you do have, during the stream, if you do have any questions about what I'm talking about, or about anything else in English, or if you want to ask about my experiences in Ukraine, anything you want, you can write your questions in the chat in English or in Ukrainian. I will see them, I'll try and answer to as many questions as I can as we go through this. But please don't be afraid to ask questions. Like, even if you think it's sort of tupe zapytania, it doesn't matter. It's important for me that all of us have the opportunity to learn something new, and I hope that as we go through this, we'll be able to have a look at everything. So we're going to make a start then with our materials for today, and we're going to be starting first of all with the passive voice. So if I just switch now, that now should be visible to you. So the way that this is going to work first is I'm going to be explaining to you some stuff about the theory, about how this is going to work with the passive voice, and then I'll be giving you some tasks to do. But as I mentioned previously, if you do have any questions while I'm explaining, please write them in the chat. I will see them and I will answer, like I said, as many questions as I can if people want to know more or want some clarification. That's not a problem. So let's start first of all with what the passive voice looks like in the English language. And the passive voice in general is built in the same way. We use the verb be in the correct tense or the correct form, and then we use the past participle of the main verb. If you know the sort of slightly more traditional system, the past participle is tretia forma. I hate that sort of pierwsza forma, druga forma. I don't know, it's just not for me. The past participle is sort of the correct name for it, we'll say it like that. And this is what we have here. So we need to use be in the correct form, whether it's present simple, present continuous, past simple, etc. And then the past participle always stays the same in the passive voice. The past participle never ever changes in this situation. So if we have a look at the example sentences that I've given here, we have, for example, an active sentence of they feed the animals, and so into the passive voice we have the animals are fed. The original sentence is in present simple, and so we keep the verb be in the present simple, which in this situation is are, and then we have the past participle of feed, which is fed. Our second example, we have they are feeding the animals. This is present continuous in the active form. If we rearrange this into a passive, then we have the animals are being fed. So once again, the word fed doesn't change. It's the past participle. It's always the same. But here the verb be changes, because in the original sentence we had our present continuous. So we need to have be in the present continuous as we do here. And so rewritten, we have are being this time. And so hopefully here you can see the difference between the first and the second sentence. We have are, which is just present simple, and then are being, which shows present continuous. So it's the same every time. We just put be into the correct form to build our sentences. And then the final example that I've given you here is they should feed the animals. So rewritten, the animals should be fed. So here we have got a modal verb. Modal verbs are a specific category of verbs in English. Verbs like should, must, will, might, may, could, can. And after modal verbs, we always need to use an infinitive, as we have in the active sentence of they should feed the animals. And so if we rewrite this into a passive, we have the animals should be fed. Once again, we have got fed, past participle, doesn't change. We've got fed, fed, fed through all three sentences. It's always exactly the same. The only thing that changes is the verb be. Everything else stays the same, nothing more that we need to do. Now, in informal English, in sort of more spoken everyday English, it is very typical to use the verb get instead of be to make our passive construction. So we can say in our final example we have here, we are often asked this question, which is a perfectly normal standard passive sentence, but when we speak we often replace this with get. And so in spoken English it's more typical that you will hear we often get asked this question. Now for your sort of purposes, let's say, for when you are trying to speak in the English language, for practical language you can use both. It doesn't really make any difference for practical purposes. But it's important to note that when you hear native speakers use the language, it's quite typical for us to use get instead of be in informal, sort of normal, everyday spoken English. But as I said, if you want to just use be because it's sort of the standard passive form, then that's completely okay. It's not going to cause any problems or any sort of strange things. It will be completely fine. Okay, so let's now move forward to the use of the passive voice. So we're now going to look at when we actually should use this construction. In what situations do we need to have it? Now, the main sort of time when we use the passive voice is when we want to focus on the action itself and not on who does this action. So, for example, we have here the sentence of the cinema was closed down. In this situation, we don't care who did this action, or we think it's not important who did this action. What we want to do is focus on the cinema. The cinema is important to us, and the fact that it has closed this is where we want the focus of the sentence to be. So, of course, you can say, for example, the management closed the cinema down. That would, of course, would be correct. But then the focus of the sentence would be in a different place. And here we would be focusing on the people and not on the cinema itself. Now, we also use the passive voice when we want to avoid using a vague subject, as it's called, like they or someone. In spoken English, generally speaking, we don't like using these words because they're non-specific, they're non-defined. Like, for example, if you say, someone has stolen my car, okay, it's grammatically correct, but why are you using someone? Why is the focus on this person who you don't know who it is? It's not important. The focus is on the fact that something is gone, something has been stolen from you. And so if we have got these vague subjects, these words like they or someone, somebody, an unknown person, something like this, then we normally prefer to use a passive voice. And we've got the example here of my watch has been stolen. So here we have an example of a present perfect passive. We have got stolen, which is the past participle. And then we have be in the present perfect form. Has been, as it is here. Now again, can you say someone has stolen my watch? Yes, absolutely you can, not a mistake, but it's a bit of an unusual construction. We much prefer in sort of more natural English to use my watch has been stolen would be much more typical. Then the third situation when we talk about the passive, when we use the passive voice, is when the doer of the action is obvious. Everyone knows who did it, or it is clear from the context. So, for example, we have got the sentence here, he was arrested last night. Why do we use the passive? Because we know that it was the police who arrested him. Only the police have the power in general to arrest people, and so it's more typical here to use the passive voice. Again, of course, you can say the police arrested him last night, but it would be unusual to use that kind of construction. So much more typical to say he was arrested last night. The next one is quite a useful little one for sort of real life, I'll say it like that, of if you want to avoid, if you don't want to say who is responsible for something. And this is quite a typical thing that politicians very often do this in English. If they want to not take responsibility, they want to kind of deflect it away from them, it's very typical to use the passive. So for example, like the sentence here, your parcel has been lost. I don't want to say, I have lost your parcel. I don't want to say, we have lost your parcel. We just want to say that the situation has happened, and so we are trying to avoid any responsibility in this situation. As I said, for politicians and sometimes for businesses and companies as well, this is often a way that they try and build their sentences to avoid taking any responsibility for a particular action or whatever it is that's gone wrong. It's also very typical to use the passive in written reports, in signs and in notices as well. This is because the passive voice tends to be a little bit more formal than the active. It's often used in slightly more formal situations. And as a result of this, when we have got some written notices, which usually use a more formal style of language, the passive is very typically used. And we've got the example here of shoplifters will be prosecuted. So again, can you say we will prosecute shoplifters? Of course you can. But for written English, it will be much more typical to use the passive voice, just because it is a more formal construction. And in this situation, we try and be a little bit more formal than usual. And so this will be the situation when we need to use it. It's also very typically used to describe processes as well. And when I say process here, I think it's quite important to highlight that I don't mean how Ukrainians often understand the word process, because in Ukrainian there is often this concept of process, tomu, present continuous. And it doesn't work like that, unfortunately. If you are describing something that takes place over a long period of time, or if you want to describe a factual situation, as we have here, then we also use the process. We also use the passive, to describe the process. So, for example, the wine is stored underground for 6 months. Here we're describing part of the process of making wine, as an example, and it's described as a fact, so we use the present simple passive, and then this is the structure that we end up with. Now, with the passive voice, there are two prepositions that we tend to use with the passive. If you want to say who did the action, then it's very typical to use by. So, for example, the cathedral was designed by Sir Christopher Wren, who was a very well-known British architect from a few hundred years ago. Here we want to put the focus on the cathedral, which is why it's at the start of the sentence. And then we use by to say who did this action. The linguistic term for somebody who does an action is called the agent, or the subject of the sentence that causes it to happen. And it's very typical to use by when we're talking about people. However, if we are talking about an instrument or a tool or something that you use, then it's very typical to use with in this situation. So, for example, the floor should only be cleaned with water. And here we're talking about a tool or an instrument, something that we can use to carry out an action. We're not talking about the person here, we're just talking about what we use to do the action, and it's very typical to use with in this situation. So that's most of the theory that we've got so far. So does anybody have any questions at this stage before we have a look at a couple more bits of practice for you to do? I'll just give you a few seconds to put them into the chat if there is anything. But so far we've not had any questions, so I hope that everything is understandable for everybody. Yeah, okay, it doesn't look like any questions are coming, so we'll go forward and we will now have a look at a little bit of practice that I'm going to ask you to do. So here we've got 8 sentences, all of which are in the active, and I am now going to be asking you, my esteemed viewers, to try and rewrite these sentences into the passive voice. So we've got 8 sentences, all of them are in the active. You need to rewrite them into the passive using the words in bold and using between 2 and 5 words. So for example, we have got, they have planted a lot of trees along the river. Here we have a present perfect active sentence, have planted, and we need to use the word been in the passive. We have that word in bold on the right, and so rewritten, a lot of trees have been planted along the river. So I'm going to give you about 4 or 5 minutes, I think should be enough time. I'll just have some water while you are getting ready for this, and I would like you to try and rewrite these 8 sentences. And yeah, you can put your answers into the chat if you wish to do so, because we'll be using that here to help us with our answers. So I'll be quiet for a couple of minutes and I'll give you a few moments to have a think. In the meantime, while people are doing this task, if you do have any other questions about the English language, or about me, about my experiences in Ukraine, or about the Ukrainian language, I'll be happy to answer them while people are going through this, because it's a good opportunity to share my experiences and to talk with you, which I don't often get the chance to do like this. Quite interesting, because we've got some answers now for the first question, and the first 3 are all different, which shows that maybe we do need a little bit more explanation, but we'll see how we do. I'll give people a couple of minutes to do all of the answers, and then we'll have a look together in a few moments. But it's like I said before, I mean, the passive voice is challenging. The passive voice is not an easy topic for for Ukrainians, generally speaking, because it's a bit different to how you often build the sentences in your language. Obviously, in your language, you can change the word order, you can reorganize the sentences, you can put certain words at the beginning, put them at the end. And in English, we can't do it in the same way as you can in Ukrainian. And so because of that, we have to use this passive voice construction, which is, yeah, it's not the easiest, unfortunately, but yeah, I'll give you a couple of minutes to have a look at these and see what we have. And again, for the second sentence, we've got two answers here, and both of them are different, which is intriguing. Okay, so about Anna's question about druga forma, tretia forma, I didn't say it's not correct, I just said I don't like this system because I think it doesn't help you to properly understand the names of what these things actually are. So if you want to say persha forma, then infinitive is the sort of the standard word, and if you wish to use the druga forma, then past simple or preterite is the usual name for this, and then past participle for the third form. I mean, like I said, if you know that system, then okay, you know, it's not exactly, it's not wrong. I mean, like obviously you can, you know, use however you prefer to memorize these things, but I just think when you're learning a language, knowing the names of these verb forms, it helps you to understand the language better, I think. I think to me it's the same in Ukrainian. Like if you had like, you know, rodový відмінок and I learnt this as druga forma, it just wouldn't make any sense to me. Like to me, I think it's much better to know the exact names of these different verb forms, because if you don't learn the names of the forms, it's quite hard to talk about language as it is. Like if you don't know what we call this meta language, the language that we use to talk about language, I think it can be very, very challenging. And so I very much believe in using the proper names for things. I'll say it like that, like using the real names of what they are in language. But I mean, certainly before I came to Ukraine, I had never heard of this first form, second form, third form idea, because when I was doing my teacher training many years ago now, for me it was infinitive, past simple, past participle, and that's the way that I will always stick with it. I think it's the best way to have a look. Okay, so I think that's more or less about 5 minutes. So we will now have a look. Let's see what we have. Someone in Ukrainian schools decided that form would be easier to remember. I think you're probably right. I think that it's one of those things that it's designed to try and make your life easier, but I think in reality it makes your life more difficult. It's like the example, like I think a very good example of this is the idea of where you are taught that will is the future simple. Will is not the future simple. That's complete nonsense. Will is a modal verb. And by definition, modal verbs do not have tense. Like you can use will for the past, for the present, and for the future. And teaching you that will is the future simple, okay, at lower levels it will help, because you think, I will, tomu я буду. But when you get more advanced in your studies of the English language, what you realize is that you can use will for any time reference depending on the context that it's in, and then it suddenly becomes very hard to forget that will is not only about the future. And I think that sometimes when teachers try and make your life easy, it's actually making it more difficult. And I very much believe in I believe in telling the truth and trying to teach you as the language is, and not just trying to make it easier for a short time, but make it more difficult over a longer time. So I think that's definitely worth some attention. All right. So let's have a look at the answers then. So I'm going to put all of the correct answers in the chat as well, and you can check with what you have, because I've got a few answers here. And as we go through this, if you have any questions about why something is as it is, then I will be happy to answer any questions as we go. So if we take sentence number 1, we've got Andrew Black wrote this article. Of course, here we have got a past simple, wrote the article. So what we need to do here is we need to use the verb be in the past simple. And be in the past simple in this situation is was. And so we need to say this article was written by Andrew Black, because we have be in the past simple. Now, a couple of the other answers that we had earlier in the chat was has been written. Now, this would be a present perfect passive. Here we have got past simple in the original sentence, and the tense always stays the same. So if you have past simple in the active, we should keep past simple in the passive. We don't change it. Similarly to, I think somebody wrote had been written, but I think they might have deleted their answer here. But in any case, we need to use the past simple here. We keep the tense the same as in the original sentence. So if we now go on to number 2, so here we have they sell these computer games all over the world. Here we need to use the verb are, which is a big clue here. So here we have got a present simple. They sell these computer games all over the world. And so in the space, we should have are sold all over the world. So the past participle of sell is sold. And then present simple, in this case, the plural present simple. So we use are. Then number 3, here we've got they are planning a music festival for next summer. So this is a present continuous sentence. We've got planned already as our bold verb, which we need to use in the past participle. And so the verb be in present continuous here will be is being. And so a music festival is being planned for next summer. So again, keeping the present continuous idea from the first to the second sentence. Number 4, I'm sure somebody will sort everything out soon. So here we have got a will future, a will future form. So we need to keep will in our passive voice. After will, we use an infinitive because it is a modal verb. And so the verb be in the infinitive, of course, is be. And so the full sentence should be, I'm sure everything will be sorted out soon. Again, you have sorted, which is the thing to help you with. Notice as well that we need to keep the preposition out. And the reason why is because sort out is a phrasal verb. It has got a precise meaning in this context. And so we need to keep it to keep the same meaning as the original sentence that we have here. Then number 5, here we have got can, which again is another modal verb. So again, we need to use the infinitive. And so because of that, we should have a meeting can be arranged for next week. Whenever we've got any modal verb like will, can, must, should, might, the same as we talked about before, it will always be the infinitive because that's the only structure that can follow a modal verb. Now number 6 is a slightly more interesting one because here we have got a negative construction. Caitlin didn't take this photo. So again, we look at the original sentence. We see that we have got a past simple, didn't take. So we need to make the verb be into past simple negative. And so if we put that idea together, we should have this photo wasn't taken by Caitlin. Past participle of take is taken, and so wasn't taken by, and then we're good. Then, number 7, now we have got a different verb form here, and now we have got a past perfect. We have got had not chosen, which is past perfect construction, had and the past participle. But again, the rules are exactly the same. we just put be into the past perfect, into the correct tense, and then the past participle. So be in the past perfect is had been. Negative form is needed here because of had not chosen. So we have hadn't been, and then chosen, past participle. So put together, he was unhappy because he hadn't been chosen for the team. We don't need to say by the coach here because it's clear that the coach chooses the team, the coach picks the team. If you want to say by the coach, I mean, you can, it's not wrong, but it's just not necessary in this sentence. And English is already a difficult language, so we don't need to make it any more difficult than it already is. And then our final sentence, are we doing enough about climate change? So here, once again, we have got a present continuous. Are we doing enough? So we already have is as the question, and we need to put this into the present continuous form to keep it the same as the original sentence. And so, as a question, we have, is enough being done about climate change? Keeping the present continuous with the same idea as the original sentence. Okay, so I'm now going to give you a second task to do, and while you're doing this task, if you have any further questions about this first one, I'll be happy to answer any other questions that you might have. So here is our second task, which is a multiple choice task. Here we have got a short text about a painting by Francisco Goya. I would like you to have a look through the text. You will see that there are 6 spaces, and in each space you need to put the correct answer A, B, C or D. So for example, in 0 we have a painting by Francisco Goya that blank stolen, and we have the choice of is, was, had and been. Now here of course we need to use the past simple because is stolen is present simple, doesn't make sense. Had stolen is active, I had stolen the painting, but here we need to use a passive construction. Been stolen just doesn't make sense because there is that's not a grammatically correct construction, there is no tense here. And so the only one we have left is was stolen, which is a past simple passive. So I'll give you about 2 or 3 minutes for this, and can you try and complete the spaces with the correct alternatives A, B, C or D. And again, if you do have any questions about the previous task, or if you would like to ask anything else, please feel free. I'm at your service. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. So, a couple of minutes to have a look. Two more minutes or so, I think, everybody. Few more seconds. People seem to be finishing. At least one person is Gosha, who's not sure about their answers, but to be honest with you, it's not always a bad thing to not be sure, because I think that if you are not sure about something that you are doing, it means that you are trying something that you don't know very well, and that is the best way to learn something new. Like you can't learn anything new unless you are happy to make mistakes. And this is something that we have to accept, unfortunately. Learning a language, like, when I speak in Ukrainian, when non-native speakers speak in English, you will make mistakes, but that's normal. That's okay. That's how we learn. Is that right? And yes, FBI is an interesting point, because Alexa has written in the chat that FBI is plural. With nouns like FBI, it's an example of what we call a collective noun. And very often with collective nouns, you can use the singular or the plural, and it will both be okay. And whether you choose the singular or the plural, it depends on if you are seeing it as one sort of object, or if you want to focus on the individual people within this organization. So for example, government is maybe a very good example of this, because if we say the government is, then we are focusing on the government as one object. But if we say the government are, then we are focusing on the individual members of the government as a group. And very often both will be grammatically correct. It just depends on where you want the focus to be. But with these collective nouns, where it's a noun that refers to a group, you can very typically use singular or plural with no real difference in meaning. Like, words like government, family, team, words like this you can often use. And FBI in this case with the plural, because here we are focusing on the people within the FBI, and so for that reason we prefer to use the plural here. That's the reason. Okay, so I've got quite a few answers now, so I think we can have a look through these together. So for number one, here our correct answer should be C. It was being transported. We've got while, which is very typically used with the continuous aspect, and here we want to show that this action was interrupted. It was an unfinished action. And so because of that, we need to use the continuous verb form, and the only continuous we have here in the passive, which is needed because someone was transporting the painting, and so it was being transported. So only because of that, C is the correct answer. Just to answer Andrew's questions about police. Police is a bit of a strange one, because police is always used in the plural. We always say the police are. We never say the police is. And it's not exactly an exception, but it's just one of those ones where we always use the plural form. So so with police, don't use the singular. We always say the police are coming, for example. We never say the police is coming. So even though it is a collective noun, we always use the plural with police. So that's just one you just have to remember, unfortunately. So Okay, so number two, so here we've got has, and then we have our space. Now here again, you need to decide if we are using an active or a passive, and I think we can agree here that we need to use a passive, because we are talking about the painting. Somebody has recovered the painting, and so because of that, we need to use a passive voice. And for that reason, we need to use D, been recovered, as the right choice here. Because in the active, someone has recovered the painting. And so rewritten, the painting has been recovered. This is a present perfect passive because we don't know exactly when this action happened. So we need to use the present perfect. And using the verb be in the present perfect plus the past participle. And so has been recovered is the right choice here. Then on to number three, so children with a cart, and then we have at about $1.1 million. So here again, we need to use a passive voice because someone values the painting like this. It's a fact, which we normally use present simple. And so for that reason, A is correct. The painting is valued at about $1.1 million. So present simple passive, nothing too unusual here, I think, because we're describing it as a fact. Then number four, this is connected very nicely to what we were talking about previously. Here we want to say who did the action with the passive voice, And as I mentioned in the theory that we looked at the beginning, we normally use by when we are referring to the person who does the action. And so for that reason, C is correct here. There's no exception here. A lawyer called the FBI, and so the FBI were called by a lawyer. We're saying who did the action, and so by is correct here. If we then go to number 5, so here you needed to notice that we've got the verb will, modal verb will before the space, and after will we need to use an infinitive, like with all modal verbs, and the only one here that includes be in the infinitive is be, and so for that reason will be included. Again here this is a passive construction because the people who organised the show will include the painting, and so the painting will be included in the show now. Okay, and then now the last one, it will instead. Once again we have got here will, modal verb, so again we need to use an infinitive after this, and again here we do need to use a passive because someone will take the painting back to its home, and so the painting will be taken back to its home in Ohio, and so for that reason D is the correct answer. Okay, so I'll give you a few seconds just to confirm everything that you have, and I'll just give you a moment if anyone has any questions. Please feel free to write them in the chat. I'll be happy to answer anything we might have, because after we've finished here, we'll be going on to the causative construction we'll be having a look at next, which is a little bit more complex, but I'm sure we'll be okay. Oh, some more water. So yeah, let's give you a few more seconds before we go forward. Don't forget, by the way, that one of the reasons that we are here is to we are trying to raise money for Prisutny, for the organisation that is helping with the rehabilitation of Ukrainian soldiers. So if you are able to donate, there is a QR code at the top above my head somewhere, and yeah, that's a QR code directly to their monobank banker. Jar doesn't really make sense in English, so we'll use banker, and so. Yeah, if you are able to donate, I would very much appreciate it. Obviously, if you can't, I understand, but the opportunity is if you'd like to do so. I said a bit of water, not small water, a bit of water, but I said it quite quickly, so it might have sounded like small water. Alright, so let's go forward then, and yeah, we'll now go on to our stuff with the causative. Now, some of you may be aware of this construction, and some of you maybe not, but this is a really useful construction. This has got many different uses, well, a couple of different uses in English, but there's many situations where we can use this. So, first of all, how we build the causative. We build the causative using the subject of the sentence. We then have the verb have in its correct tense, in its correct form, so present simple, past simple, etc., etc. We then have a noun, and then we have the past participle, or this third form of the verb. So for example, we have the sentence, I had my hair cut yesterday. So here we have the subject I. We have the verb had, in this case in past simple, because yesterday, my hair, which is the noun, and then cut, which is the past participle of the verb cut. Cut doesn't change in any of the forms in English. It's cut, 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 stays exactly the same. Now, the reason why we use this construction is we use this to show that we don't do something ourselves, but we ask or we pay someone to do something for us. Do I have PayPal? Yes, I do, but I'm not collecting money for me today. This is completely благодійний. So if you go to Twitter or whatever and try and find Prisutny and you want to donate in a different way, I think they have PayPal as well. So if you can find them, I think they're called Twoje majbutnie, jak się nie pomylają się. So yeah, you can find them if you want to donate in that way and not through Mono. But for me, I'm not collecting anything for me today. This is completely for charity, for the soldiers. So back to the sentences. So I cut my hair yesterday. This would mean I did it myself. I cut my hair. I am there with my scissors, cutting my fringe. But I had my hair cut yesterday. This means that I paid or I asked someone to cut my hair. So I paid someone or I asked someone to do something for me. And so the whole idea of this construction, or one of the main ideas I should say, is that we don't do something ourselves, but we ask someone to do it for us. And again here we can use have in almost any tense. There's one exception that I'll talk about on the next page, but we can use it in pretty much any tense, any form. So for example, we are having our house renovated at the moment. So again, this means that we are paying someone, some professionals, builders, to renovate our house. Have you had your car repaired? I am not asking if you are repairing your car, but I'm asking, have you paid someone else, a mechanic probably, to repair your car? So we can use this in any tense, any form, apart with one exception that we'll talk about in just a moment. But the whole idea of this is that we use it to show that we are asking someone to do something for us, and that we are not doing it ourselves. We're asking, we are paying someone to do it for us. Now, there is another situation where we can use the causative, and this one, if you are one of these people who likes to kind of sort of translate everything sort of, doslivno into Ukrainian, it will sound a little bit strange, but this is also the other typical use of the causative. And we can also use it to describe a situation when something unpleasant happens to us, and we want to specifically focus on the fact that it was a negative experience. So, for example, if we say, my bag was stolen, this is just a standard passive past simple like we talked about before, and this is just as a fact in this sentence. There is no opinion, there are no feelings, no emotions, you're just saying, my bag was stolen, krapka, that is a fact and nothing more. But I had my bag stolen using this causative construction in the past simple. Here we want to emphasize, that it was not pleasant, that it was something that we have a negative feeling about. And it specifically has this negative connotation. So both of these sentences, my bag was stolen, I had my bag stolen, both of these give the same information, but the second sentence adds feeling, it adds emotion. And this is very often, not just in the causative, but just in general in English, very often when we can give the same idea in different ways, very often the difference will be connected to feelings, it will be connected to the emotion that you give when you are describing this situation. And yeah, this is a good example of this. Now, with this causative, in both meanings, in when we want to describe that we paid someone to do something for us, and when we want to describe an unpleasant situation, we often use get instead of have. So for example, I got my hair cut yesterday. That's the same meaning as I had my hair cut yesterday. It's less formal, it's very much spoken English, but it's very typical and very usual to hear this. However, we do not use get in the present perfect. And this is just something that you have to remember, unfortunately. So we've got the example of a wrong sentence here. We would need to say, I have had my ears pierced. That would be fine, that would be completely okay, but I have got my ears pierced, unfortunately, is not correct because it is the present perfect. Now, why we don't use it in the present perfect is actually quite complicated. grammatically, and it's not really what we're here for. You can just remember that when we are using this causative, the easiest way for you to use it, I think, is just to use have, because it's always natural, it's always correct, and you will never have any difficulties. But just know that you will hear native speakers using get, and if you do wish to use get yourselves, obviously that's your choice. But it's definitely worth remembering that we don't use get in the present perfect. Everything else we do, but not in the present perfect form. So let's now do 2 practice tasks with these, and then I think after that it'll probably be time to finish up for today, but we'll do a couple of practice tasks. So here is our first practice task, which for some reason is not quite in the quality it was when I took a screenshot earlier. So here we have got 6 sentences. I would like you to rewrite these sentences using the causative form with have. So remember the structure of the causative, which I will just put into the, I'll put it into the chat now just to remind you. So we need to use the subject, we need to use the verb have in its correct form, then we use a noun, and then we use the past participle of the verb, or the third form of the verb if you know this system. So again, I will give you a few minutes to have a look at these tasks. In the meantime, as usual, if you do have any questions you would like to ask me about anything, not only this topic, then please feel free to put them in the chat and I'll be happy to answer anything that you might have. Just seen a comment, я вже забула, коли вчили такі нюанси, чи вчили взагалі. Ну так, with the causative, it's one of those things that it's very easy to forget, I think. I think it's one of those areas of grammar that you don't necessarily see every day, and so because of this, it's not something that's very often studied. I mean, in English language textbooks, it usually appears sort of late B1, possibly B2, I guess, depending on the series of books, but at B2, like by the end of B2, certainly it would be expected that you are aware and that you can use this construction, along with the passive voice, of course, because the passive voice is very, very, very widespread in English. It's a very, very typical use. Yeah, with the causative, it's a little bit more difficult. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, Alexi, thank you for your message. If you have missed most of the stream, and this will be recorded and it will be published like as a recording on YouTube after we've finished. So if you want to go back and rewatch anything, or please feel free to do so. But yeah, I mean, the Ukrainian passive voice is just something that I would agree that it's quite cumbersome, in the sense of like, it's not something that you very rarely hear. It's not something that you very typically hear in the Ukrainian language. Like very often you just use word order, or you just try and rebuild the sentence in a different way. And yeah, it's certainly the way it's used in the Ukrainian language and the way that it's used in the English language are two very different ways of constructing sentences. And so you do have to understand it in English rather than trying to necessarily find a Ukrainian equivalent to this, I would say. So yeah. Right, just 1 more minute, everybody. And we'll go through these together. Getting a few answers coming through so far. Yeah, there's a couple of good ones. A couple we need to talk about, certainly, but yeah, a couple coming through. I think the second sentence is almost definitely not from a British person, because in most British houses we don't have air conditioning. It's quite rare to have this system, so it's probably from an American speaker or somebody from a slightly warmer country than where I'm from. Okay, so a few more seconds, everyone, and then we'll go through the answers. Is it like let someone do something for you without saying let? Not exactly, because if you say, like, for example, I let someone cut my hair, it means that you gave them permission, like you allowed them to do this. Whereas with the causative, if we are talking about this situation we have now, it means that you are asking them to do it, or you are paying them to do it. So with the causative, it specifically means that you want this person to do it for you and you ask them to do it. Whereas let is usually when the other person wants to do it and you give them some kind of permission. You say it's okay for them to do this. So, I mean, in both situations, the result will be the same, that someone will cut your hair, but the sort of situation that you are in is a little bit different. So yeah, with this one, with the causative, you are asking or paying someone to do it for you, whereas let, you are giving them permission to do it. You are allowing them. So it's a little bit of a different way of approaching the situation. I guess we can say it like that. Okay, right, so some people have already written all of their answers, so I think I can now share with you the correct ones. So the first sentence that we had, there used to be some steps up to the shop. I decided to. After decide to, we use the infinitive of the verb, and so here we should say have them removed is the right choice for number one. I decided to have them removed. Again, in spoken English, if you say get them removed, fine, completely okay, but for the purposes of this task, we'll keep have, just because it is the standard form. We'll say it like that. So yeah, have them removed is correct here. Now, number two, I can see a couple of people kind of fell into a little trap here, almost. So a lot of people got the idea of, we need to say, yeah, have the air conditioning check, with checked, obviously past participle with checked. But we know it's fine, so we know that this action happened in the past, but we don't know when this action happened. We have no time reference here. And if we don't know when an action happened in the past, then normally we have to use the present perfect. And this is what we have here. So what we need to say is, I have had the air conditioning checked. So we have checked in the past participle. Have is in the present perfect because we don't know, or we don't say when the action happened. And so have in present perfect is have had. And so yeah, I have had the air conditioning checked. If we had a word like yesterday, then we would use past simple. I had the air conditioning checked yesterday. But just in general in English, not just in the causative, but just in general, if we talk about a past action and we know or we say when, we use past simple. But if we don't know or we don't say when, then normally we use present perfect because there is no time reference. We don't know when the action happened. And here we have no time, so I have had the air conditioning checked. So if we go to number three, so here we do have a time reference. Here we have the word yesterday, and so now we can use the past simple. And we should indeed use the past simple here. And so we should have, I had some tables delivered yesterday. We know when, we have the time reference, so I paid someone to deliver the tables, so I had some tables delivered yesterday. Now, number four, here we've got a very key sort of moment, a very key sentence here, which is sorry about the noise. So here we are obviously talking about something that is happening at the moment, happening now or around now, and that is why we are apologising for this. And if an action is happening now or around now, as I'm sure all of you are aware, we need to use the present continuous verb form. And so because of that, we should have, I am having some new equipment installed in the kitchen. So present continuous, be having or I am having as it is here, and then install in the past participle, so installed. Number 5, here we have got, again, we have a time reference in this situation. We've got last week. We know when the action happened. We've got a specific time. So now we switch back to past simple, like we did in number 3, as we had earlier in the task. And so past simple from have is had. And so I had the walls painted a warm orange colour last week. Specifically here, because we have last week. If we didn't have last week, then we would use present perfect. I have had the walls painted a warm orange colour. But because of last week, we have the time reference, and so past simple. And finally, number 6, here we have got a modal verb, which is may in this case. And after modal verbs, as I've said many times today, we need to use an infinitive. And so this builds as I may have another room added at the back next year. As I said, may is a modal verb, and so we need to use the infinitive, and then the past participle of add is added. So let's now go then to our final task for today. While you're doing this last task, if you do have any questions about the previous task, I'll be happy to answer any as you're going through this. So here is our final task. Once again, we've got 6 more sentences, and again here you need to complete them with the causative form of the verb. Notice in the instructions that the task wants you to use get where it's possible. Remember, as we talked about before, if I'll just go back to remind you, in informal English we often use get instead of have, except in the present perfect. So if you think it's present perfect, then we need to use have, otherwise get will be the right choice. So a couple of minutes to have a look, and can you try and complete these sentences in the causative with get where possible? If you have any other questions about the previous task or anything else, please put them in the chat. And after we finish this task, I think it'll be time to finish up for today, but we'll get through this one first and then we'll have a look. This may have done something. Does it have a degree of uncertainty about whether I will or will not do it? Well, firstly we need to say may have something done is the order, because we need to use have and then the noun and then the past participle. And yeah, this is uncertainty. When we use may or might or could to refer to the future, all of these show that you are not sure about the future. So yeah, if we are sure, then we use a different future form. We can use will, we can use be going to. It depends on what you're referring to, obviously, but yeah, may, like for example, I may have my hair cut next week, for example. This just shows it's possible. Maybe I will, maybe I won't, and yeah, in that case we have it like this. When do we use causative in the present continuous? So we use the causative in the present continuous if someone is doing something for us now at the present moment. So for example, if we go back to the haircut, because it's the easiest example, we have got here, if we have got, for example, I'm having my haircut now, if someone calls me and says, where are you? Okay. I am at the hairdresser's, I am having my hair cut, because it's happening at the present moment. And so for that reason, we should use here the present continuous. So that's the main point. If it's happening now and someone is doing something for us. And that's the point here. Daniel, could you please share a link to the bank of Посилання here in the comments? Yes, I can. Yes, that's a very good idea. Just give me a moment, because I need to just scan it myself. I'll just put it in. Yeah, I probably should have put that at the start. Actually, I'll put it in and I'll pin it to the top. That's a good idea. I should have done that before, probably. Let me just find the banker. Okay, so yeah, there should now be a link to the banker in the chat, and I pinned it, so hopefully it should be visible to everybody. So if you're watching on your phone, then you should be able to click the link, and that should take you directly there to provide help for the rehabilitation of the soldiers. Yeah, so 1 more minute, everyone, and then we'll have a look together. All right, so let's have a look through these together then. So once again, I will put the answers into the chat, same as always, and yeah, we'll see what we've got here. So let's have a look at the first sentence. So we have, the windows in this shop are usually dirty. The owners, etc., them not clean regularly. So here we need to use a negative form of the causative. We need to use present simple because we have got we've got here the word regularly, which usually is used with the present simple. And so if we put this idea together, we should have the owners don't get them cleaned regularly. If you want to make a negative causative, you make the verb get, or have as it is sometimes, you need to make that verb negative. That's the part that we need, because cleaned is just a past participle. That's not the part that we need to make negative. So don't get them cleaned regularly, and then we're good. Now, number 2, this is clearly a negative experience that the person is trying to describe here, that their application was turned down. But the question is here of what verb form we need to use, what tense. So here we need to notice in the second part of the sentence, we have, I had to apply to another college. And here we have got just a normal, regular past simple. Now, obviously, your application was turned down first, and then you had to apply to another college. So we have 2 actions in chronological order. First, the college turned down your application, and then you applied to another college. And if we have got 2 past actions in chronological order, as we do here, then we just use past simple, past simple. And so, I got my application turned down is the right choice here. Again, we can use had, I had my application turned down would also be okay. But yeah, here we should just use I got my application turned down, just a standard past simple. Then for number 3, here we have got with should, which again, I will repeat what I've said about 10 times today. After should, we need to use an infinitive. So get in the infinitive, of course, is just get. So we should get that tap fixed, is the right choice here. Past participle of fix is fixed. Then number 4, we have got a time reference. It was the time when you were on the underground. So here we are referring to a precise moment. We know when the action happened. And so here we should use a past simple. So here, I got my money stolen while I was on the underground. It's fine here, just a regular past simple. Then 5. Again, here, was it expensive? So now, again, we are referring to a specific time. We're referring to the time of when we want to know whether it was expensive. So we need to use, again, here, a past simple. So once again, where did you get your bike repaired is the right choice here. I can't spell bike for some reason. It's pretty bad for an English teacher. Repaired. There we go. So yeah, where did you get your bike repaired? So this is past simple because we're asking 2 questions about a moment that happened at the same time as each other. And here it's a past simple question form. So we need to use did, subject, and then get. So where did you get your bike repaired? And then finally, the last one, we've got last week. So once again, we've got here a precise time for past simple. So we should have here, they got their electricity cut off last week. Put this in the chat. They got their electricity cut off last week. So once again, just to remind you that using get in this kind of construction, it is informal. In some of these, like personally, I would prefer to use have. Like for example, number 2 sounds like quite a formal sentence, so I think I would probably use I had my application turned down. But in all of these sentences, get is correct because we don't have any present perfects here. All of these are logical, and yeah, this is what we need. So yes, I mean, in principle, that's pretty much everything that I wanted us to have a look at today. So does anybody have any final questions before I end the stream for today? I'll give people a moment just to collect their thoughts and just see if there's anything they would like to ask. But in any case, I mean, I hope that this has been a useful experience. I hope we've all learned. Hopefully, there's something new, some new practice. I mean, obviously, it's a rather different experience for me, sort of not teaching exactly, but explaining like this, where it is very much sort of me talking to myself and then getting some messages back from it. But I certainly hope for you that it's been a useful experience and that we've got what we had. Okay, so question from Alexis. Say I'm at the police and I complain about several thefts on the underground. Can I use I had my money stolen, your stupid underground? You can say I had my money stolen, but you would need to reference it to a past simple. Would need to be the point here. Like you would need to reference it to a past simple time, because we normally only use the past perfect if it happened before another previous action and it's not in chronological order. But in principle, yes, had is completely correct, because the past perfect of have is had, and so yeah, I had my money stolen would be grammatically correct if you are referring to it to a previous past simple time. So yeah, so I think that's pretty much it. There doesn't seem to be any other questions from anybody. So yeah, I'd like to thank all of you for attending. I mean, like I said, I hope it was very useful. If you do end up having any other questions or anything you would like to ask about this, or indeed about anything else, just leave a comment under the video after the recording is finished. I'll see it, and yeah, I'll try and point you in the right direction. So yeah, so thank you all very much for coming. I guess I can switch to Ukrainian for the end. Тому я дуже вам вдячний за участь. Я сподіваюся, що це було корисно. Я бажаю всім вам мирного дня. Бережіть себе. Слава Україні. До побачення.